So in today's video, we're going to be pixel peeping. Okay, so we're actually not going to do that. We're going to compare some files, okay? If you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that back in June, I bought an X-Pro 3. I still have my EOS R and my 50 and 24L lenses. That is my main Canon setup, and I also have the X-Pro 3. So in this video, I'm going to do a little comparison between the Canon and the Fuji files. Now, I did one of these a while ago where I was just comparing the X-Pro 3 to the EOS R in a studio setting. If you want to watch that video, you can watch it here. This video is going to give you a comparison between the fast aperture lenses outdoors. I just picked up the 56 1.2 for Fuji, and I'm comparing that with my trusty Canon 50 1.2L. Let's jump into Lightroom and check out these files. So here we go. So I was shooting with my friend Patricia, and here she is. Now, we were just doing some creative shots in my studio. We're using some light modifiers and things on the lens to get these sort of interesting blurs. That's not from the lens, that's from a modifier, which in this case was a Ziploc bag. So you'll see here, this is the Canon file, and I have added some grain. This one's like not tack sharp. I think it's a focusing issue. Here's the Fuji file. They look really similar. I mean, you can barely tell a difference. Quite honestly, I think they both look really good. Let's look at this picture. So I don't really have anything to compare this with. If you want to see more studio comparisons, you should watch my video, which I mentioned. But this is just a shot taken with a strobe in the studio. Look how beautiful this is. And I mean, look at the detail. And sorry if you're going to be pissed that I'm using Lightroom, but I really don't, you know, I have Capture One, I have Lightroom, it's fine. The file looks good. It would probably look a little bit sharper in Capture One when you zoom in, but look at it here. I mean, this is how you're going to see it in most cases. It looks really good, no worries. This is a long exposure that I did with my EOS R, which was kind of fun. All right, let's get into the good stuff here. All right, so we have the Fujifilm on the left and the Canon on the right. So obviously these are not framed the same, quite obviously. But if you zoom in here to the Canon file, there's still a lot of crispness. It really maintains that detail. Let's zoom in here on the Fuji file. And again, it's a really beautiful file. But look at the bokeh. I mean, can you tell a difference between these? Like, I know that people get really hung up on, oh, it's APS-C, you lose the bokeh, you lose the creaminess. Look, there is no difference. There's no issue with bokeh here. I mean, both of these lenses produce really similar looks. I mean, look at this file. The background is dreamy, it looks beautiful. This Fuji file is using the classic negative film simulation, which comes with the X-Pro 3, which I don't really use it on people all that much, but I think for this it was nice. I really like what it does to the greens. And then again, like the Canon file is really solid. I mean, like you have tons of detail here when you zoom in. It's really sharp, looks beautiful. So again, we're comparing the Fuji XF 56 1.2, which is a 85-ish millimeter equivalent in full frame, and then we're comparing the 50 1.2L, which is a Canon lens, obviously 50 millimeters. So the focal lengths are different here, but I think for the systems, these lenses are comparable in that they're quite popular, they have a similar aperture. They're the two that I would gravitate towards, you know, when shooting Fuji, a fast aperture lens, it would be the 56. When shooting Canon, my favorite fast aperture lens would be the 1.2. So that's why I'm comparing these two. All right, so let's move on. This one's a little bit more comparable. It's a more similar frame, more similar, you know, she's about equal in these frames. She's a little bit closer on the Canon. But again, like, look at this background blur. Can you tell a difference? Like, would you know this is APS-C? Are you losing any bokeh? No. 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 I mean, that's not a question anymore. It's like, with Fuji and Canon and all this, it's like, oh, is Canon better than Fuji? Is Fuji better than Canon? Oh, you get a creamier background in Canon than you do Fuji because it's full frame. All of that's nonsense. I mean, Maybe there's a little bit of a difference. I don't see it here. To me, these are both gorgeous files. Now let's zoom in. By the way, if you're a fan of that creamy bokeh, give this video a like, subscribe. So loads of detail here with the Canon. By the way, this is shot at 1.8, so I didn't stop down all the way. If you stop down all the way, it's not as sharp. That's just the way fast aperture lenses are. Here on the Fuji, I don't remember. Okay, so I was shooting wide open on the Fujifilm, but theoretically, since it's a crop sensor, it should be sharp, wide open. And it is. I mean, it's really sharp. It's not as crisp as the full frame. It's just not. It's just not as tack sharp. This is the exact same thing that I said in my other video where I'm comparing the studio portraits. The Canon files are just sharper. They're just crisper. There's like an extra level of HD that's in there that's not in the Fuji. But, you know, again, like look at these two side by side. Like the Fujifilm honestly looks better to me. Like I prefer the Fujifilm picture out of these two. It looks more like film. It's softer. I mean, not really, but it kind of seems like it's a little bit softer. It's just beautiful. It's a great picture. You get that extra level of detail here on the Canon, but it looks more digital to me. Even though these were both digital shots, the Fujifilm feels more like film, which is interesting. Okay, this is just a shot that I wanted to show you because I think it's just beautiful. This is what I got with my Fuji 56 1.2. Look at that bokeh. I mean, come on. If you're worried about depth of field on an APS-C camera, stop. Just stop. Come on. Okay, so now let's look at these two. All right, so we have the Canon on the right and the Fuji on the left. We zoom in here. Again, the Canon file is tack sharp. It's beautiful, crisp, looks great. The Fuji file is not as sharp, but it still looks good. If we look at them zoomed out like this, again, the Canon was shot at 1.8. The Fuji was shot at 1.8, yeah. So they're both shot at 1.8, and yet there's still like not as much clarity here in the Fuji file. Now, again, don't tell me it's because of light. Fine, tell me it's because of Lightroom and Capture One, and you know, it's fine. Sorry. Next time we'll look at these in Capture One. But I really think, you know, I have Capture One. I use Lightroom for the majority of my work. It's not an issue for me. I do sometimes see an issue if I add sharpening, which I haven't done here to any of these files. They are colored, but they haven't been sharpened or anything like that. So there really isn't that big of a difference. Out of these two, I really prefer the Canon. I think it's just beautiful. But I mean, there's no difference in depth of field, again. So if you're worried about the bokeh, stop. Okay, let's look at these last two. So that's the Canon, and this is the Fuji. Again, same theme here. So Fuji's a little bit softer, looks more like film. It's not as crisp, it doesn't have that digital edge that the Canon does. You zoom into this Canon and it's like just a symphony of detail. I mean, it's just, look at that. Again, Canon shot at 1.8. The Fuji was shot at 1.8. So these are shot at the same aperture. And again, you're just getting a little bit extra crispness. But honestly, for all of these photos, when you're looking at them, if you aren't zoomed in and peeping, pixel peeping, you're not going to notice a difference probably at all. They look really similar. So that's just a really quick test. These are a few shots that I pulled from our shoot. This is by no means, you know, an example of every photo shoot out there between Fuji and Canon, and I was just shooting with them like I normally would. I wasn't, you know, framing shots specifically to test. I just was shooting like I normally would with them. What I noticed is that across the board, the Canon was sharper and the files were more crisp, and I had a lot of Fuji files that seemed like I couldn't tell if I had misfocused or if they were just a little bit soft. I tried shooting at 1.8. 1.2, it sort of was the same, but it didn't really bother me that much because the images were just beautiful. I mean, I mean, again, let's look at, I mean, look at this picture. It's so pretty. I love it. And same thing with, you know, really any of these, like this one, they're great. The Fuji cameras produce a really beautiful and interesting look. If you're looking for a super crisp image, you will get that from the full frame. Now, again, if you stop up your lens, here again is a studio shot, which I showed you, and which, again, you can watch in my studio video. It's tack sharp. I mean, but this was the 23, this lens was the 23mm f2 at f8. So different lens, small little lens, but it's super sharp, super beautiful. There's still a level of detail that you're not getting from the Fuji cameras just as a result of the sensor size, but it's not I mean, it's not an issue. It's just not. I think that I'm making this video to say, like, if you're curious about investing in Fuji or Canon, like for me, I'm trying to figure out if I could realistically, you know, sell my Canon gear and move over to Fuji. And one of the things that you worry about when you're looking into that Fuji gear is, oh my God, it's APS-C. Like, I'm not going to be able to have the same depth of field. I'm not going to have those creamy backgrounds that I love. Oh my God, like, I don't know if it's worth it for me. That's not an issue. If you're worried about bokeh and depth of field, don't be. The question you should be asking yourself is, what am I going to be shooting with this camera, and is this camera going to be able to shoot that in the way that I want it to? So anyway, I hope that this video has been helpful for you to see some of my work and some of, you know, a little bit of a comparison between some of these files. I mean, there's tons of videos out there, so, you know, you can do your research, you can watch others. Some people might have different experiences, but overall, you know, you can't go wrong either way. I would say play around with each camera before investing. See if you have a preference to one or the other, you know, right off the bat. You know, give it some time, experiment, and really think about if the camera you're gonna buy is gonna be one that can do what you need it to do for you and for your style of shooting, for your work, your workflow, all of that. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Love is